And thank you. We're going to hear now from the agency on S60, which we took some testimony on yesterday from some farmers. We've had a side-by-side, just for your sake, I'll mention this, with S60 with H229, which is a similar bill. So we would like to hear whatever your thoughts are.
Sure. For the record, Nicole Dubuque, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. So I think I'll start off with just saying, I think we all agree that there's a gap, right? We know that there's not immediate disaster relief funding available for agriculture, and we've definitely seen that over the past couple of years with the flooding and the freeze that we experienced. That said, I just wanted to point out a few things in the bill that I've noticed and I wanted to bring to the committee's attention. One, in the beginning, when we talk about the definitions, it doesn't look like there is an allowance within this bill for kind of one-off events, which may be completely intentional, but I think the most frequent things that we see are like barn collapse, farm structure fire, and it doesn't appear like that would be covered in the bill.
Isolated a barn collapses, not because of weather necessarily, or
it could be. Like recently I saw on the news that there was a barn collapse and I believe it had to do with snow load. We also, yeah,
correct.
okay. And then we do also had barn fires, and those structures are not frequently insured because it's very expensive to insure them. So I just wanted to bring that up, that it doesn't have coverage there. And where I could see disaster relief funding being most helpful in those instances is like the immediate cleanup. Like, how do we get, perhaps the livestock in a safe place? How do we just get some cleanup done? Then I noticed, I wanted to point out that on page 11 of the bill, it starts to talk about the review board. And so,
Nicole, sorry, just want to stop you there.
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but the bill that I have in front of me only has 8 pages. So this is the as passed by the Senate version of S60.
Yeah.
Um,
So how many pages do you have? I have
You
14.
might have the official and you might have the.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Then, thank you.
I have the official.
All right, which is marked, is it marked up? Is that?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So my bill doesn't actually really start until page 9.
Okay, all right. You
Sorry.
can just, that's fine. You can just say
Always
what section you're on and we'll figure it out.
Sure. So I am skipping to the Farm Security Special Fund grants portion of the bill, 4633. And I just wanted to point out, this is where it says the secretary, after consultation with the review board, shall award grants from the Farm Security Special Fund. So a few things here. One, this seems to me that it would be along the lines of open meeting law, which means that we would have to post the review board meetings and the public could watch those. And so I just wanted to point that out. If the intention is to have the board review applications that may have personal financial information of the farmers, we would just want to keep that in mind. Secondly, it looks like a couple places in the bill, it implies first come, first served. So I just want to note there that what we've seen with BGAP is that frequently the first applicants are the ones with the most resources, the most organized, and sometimes, not always, the least amount of loss, right? Because if you don't have a computer, you can't live in your house, you might not be as quick to get an application in as if like just your barn flooded, for example. So I just wanted to point that out. Also, the bill speaks to grants specifically. And with a grant, what we would be doing is we would have an application, we would approve the application, and by we, according to this bill, it would be a representative of our agency with the board. And then you would execute a grant with the farmer. And grants would be that all of their expenditures, we would reimburse them for. So as far as giving the farmer cash flow on the front end to be able to make the fixes, I think we would want to talk about it being more of a beneficiary payment than a grant, if that's the intention. Because the grant, they would essentially have to already have their barn fixed or be replanted, and then we'd reimburse them for that. And I just don't know that the smaller farmers have the cash flow to do that.
So that's a distinction between two existing concepts that are well-defined. So a grant means one thing, and a beneficiary payment would mean something else. Okay. And sorry, Representative Nelson.
No, I was just taking in what you were saying. Yeah, that's a good point, though.
Yeah. We do have granting programs, but typically the grant is like, we want you on the farm to improve your practices. And so we provide some funding, or USDA provides some funding, and then you do this for us to better the environment in Vermont. So it really is a grant relationship. Whereas this is like something's happened to someone and we want them to be categorically eligible to have funding. And we don't necessarily need them to have performance measures or anything like that either.
So BGAP, were those grants or beneficiary or like working lands grants? What would those be?
So ACCD would have more on exactly what they did behind the scenes, but my understanding is those were like beneficiary payments to some extent.
Yeah, working lands is a grant. So like when we get our grant awarded to us to purchase a drill, we had to go out and purchase the drill, and then we receive the money after we sent in the
Reimbursement.
reimbursement. Yeah.
And so a lot of times, to Representative Nelson's point, farmers can get financing and then they get reimbursed and they can pay off that financing. But in these scenarios, it would be less likely that they would want to or be able to do that. So just wanted to point that out. I'm not going to use the page numbers, but in the same section, but we're looking down to the secretary shall develop a streamlined application for awards under this section. If you go down to number 4 under that, it says that we would use a year-end report of farm income and expenses from Schedule F. And I just want to point out that the definition in here is that it's a farm that would be under the RAPs, and want to just say that not all farms that comply with the RAPs would file a Schedule F, and also not all farms that file a Schedule F would be under the RAPs. Typically, a Schedule F, my understanding, and I'm not a tax expert, is that would more be with like a sole proprietor. It wouldn't cover all of the farms that could be eligible for this funding. So we would need an alternative to look at income.
So we have a couple of farmers, and I don't know whether you want to weigh in. No, or just maybe we can make a note of this to go back.
Yeah, I could check. I don't, because we're an LLC.
Yeah.
I don't know if we file a Schedule F per se.
Okay.
Where, Greg, are you a sole proprietorship or?
Whereas LLC,
Yeah, so,
remember following that schedule last, my wife does.
yeah.
So that's an attachment to a 1040 maybe, and it's not something that maybe, so this would, as it's written, then make some farms many farms ineligible, possibly.
Well, and do vegetable farms have RAPs? I don't
Well, that
know.
was the other point, yeah, so.
So I would not feel comfortable speaking to all of like the details of the RAPs, but I can definitely send you some information after the fact. I don't want to misspeak. But yeah, no, it would cause some eligibility issues perhaps, but I think this is mostly talking about income eligibility. So I don't know if there would be the leeway to be able to say we'd accept these other, forms of income, like just showing your 1040 or showing your ups and downs for your business or whatnot. We did that with the BGAP.
I don't remember having any income sensitivity to it. It was, proving that you had loss. And then you could receive 50% of your loss up to $150,000. I don't think there was any discrimination on whether you had 5 acres of vegetables or 270 acres of vegetables or milk 50 cows grass fed, or if you milk 2,000 cows. It was just that you had a loss that you could document and that you were a farmer. And then you would receive, 50% of your loss up to $150,000.
What kind of documentation though? Because
I
just,
like, go to NRCS and get a field map. And that field map, I had, 100 acres of corn here, and it's now, instead of chest high, it's now this tall, and it's not coming back. So I lost 100 acres of corn outright, and then there's probably a book value somewhere that they use, or maybe they say, how much do you have into growing this crop per acre? And use that. I don't know if they'll use that value or a common value, like it, should have been 22 ton per acre and corn size was trading at $50 a ton. This is, you lost $1,100 per acre, or are they going to say you lost this $650 per acre it cost you to grow the crop? I don't know. I don't know what number they're looking for, or what number we want to look for. Like, are we going to reimburse, if Greg has an early frost and loses his apple crop, and he applies for it in May, then he ends up getting a third of an apple crop. Well,
right, it seems a lot must depend sort of just on the honor system with farmers. I mean,
Well-
some photographs and things, the best
Yeah.
estimates, but it seems to have the agency actually dig into some of these and
Well,
document them.
and that's why you have they have it set up to have farmers on this board. So maybe they go out to see Greg and say, let's have a look. And, Greg says, hey, I might get a third of a crop. So I lost 2/3 of my crop valued at, it's $5 pack or whatever value you use. And you say, normally I have this many bushel and, this is what I'm going to be off, which is way more than, even 50%, it's more than $150,000. But, hey,
So I think we're delving into an area that we didn't really explore too much when we had the testimony yesterday, which is, how we fine tune the evaluation process. And I think also what you're pointing out is, Nicole, is that we don't want to be excluding anybody inadvertently by saying you have to have Schedule F, right?
Right.
But we do want, I think we heard yesterday that the intent was just to be sure that these were people who were actually engaged in the business of farming, as opposed to somebody who maybe just had a big garden. So,
Right. And so I think maybe that language could be updated a little bit to just be a little bit broader to prove that you are making income off of farming, right? And it doesn't have to be a Schedule F. And then I just wanted to point to Representative Nelson. I just want to let you know where I brought this up in the bill, or why I brought up some of the financial pieces is in section 4633, number 2, it says the secretary shall establish criteria for the amount of an award based on the annual net income of the farm in relation to the median net income of all farms in Vermont. I had read that to mean that there was income eligibility that would need to be established, but I don't know if I'm off base with the intent of that.
yeah. I think that to the extent that we can answer what the intent was, that yes, that it was somehow to be, the award would somehow be related to the relative loss compared to their total income.
Okay. Understood. Sorry to make you watch me go through this. I just wanted to make sure I got it all in there. I think the other thing that came to mind as something that perhaps we would need more clarity on is the expediency piece. So it seems like in the conversations that I've had that with good reason, the purpose is how do we get money out quickly to farmers so that they cannot lose an entire season or they cannot lose all of their income for the year, for sure. And so that's why I wanted to point out, one, that grants can take a while, so that's not necessarily expedient. Two, having the board structure and it not be like an agency review can take longer, right? Because we have to call the meeting, we have to post the meeting within a certain number of days so that it's advertised so that the public knows about it. Then we have to have that meeting and do the follow-up. So that could add to the length of time it would take to get things processed. But otherwise, I feel like those were my main points. And then I also gave a handout that I wanted to point out in case this is.
Before we go to the handout, I want to go back for a moment to the expediency
Yes.
question and the challenge maybe of pulling a board together. If it were something other than, if we called it something other than a board, would that make a difference? If it was a committee or I don't know what you would call it, but would that make any difference?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I don't know the open meeting law like the back of my hand, so I don't want to say that if it's called a certain thing, it could be different. But perhaps I'm sure that there could be some sort of review group that didn't have to be on a public meeting, because my main concern with that, to be honest with you, other than expediency, is exposing farmers' financial information in that way.
Maybe a question for Ledge Council,
Yeah.
Mr. O'Grady.
So I think we can, we'll take all of this feedback and then we can have conversations with our Ledge Council and among ourselves here too. Greg?
I wonder if it would be prudent to have somebody from FSA or something come and give testimony on how they do crop insurance and do awards, and whatnot, just to see maybe to get ideas.
Yeah, we got
Or did we already-
names yesterday and I think FSA was one and then I can't remember, but I think Sidonia may have reached out to, we're in the process of trying to connect with somebody from the insurance world and FSA.
Are those?
Not that we necessarily want to model what they're doing, but.
They testified in this, they testified in the Senate ag when they were
Oh, okay.
looking this over.
I don't want to speak for FSA, but I know from the last 2 floods and programs that had been run, I feel comfortable at least saying that I've heard that their staffing levels have been an issue. I know some of their recovery programs took over a year to get payments out. So that would add to my expediency concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I would say about that. Also, as far as the eligibility requirements and the application materials, it looks like the majority of that would be up to the Agency of Agriculture to create and do most of the review and get the payments out the door. So I just want to note that we also don't have a lot of extra capacity. So that would be potentially a big lift if we're talking about like a widespread event, right?
Okay, you were about to
Yeah.
hand up then. Yeah.
So I just printed off part of the statute. So this is Title VI, and we are looking at authority to address public health hazards and food safety issues. I just wanted to point this out because I feel like this language is helpful and could potentially get us all where we want to be at some point. So on the second page, there's a piece that says, basically that the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets has the authority to respond to and remediate incidences of mass animal death, agricultural structure fires, or other emergencies on a farm in order to prevent a public health hazard or protect the environment, including expending up to $25,000 in funding from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets budget to remediate the issue when there are no other financial resources available and the Secretary has determined the expenditure is necessary for either public health or the environment. Just to show you this, and then also we'll point out that at this point, we don't have like an extra fund that our secretary can pull from. And obviously, some of the natural disasters that we're talking about, like freeze, for example, wouldn't necessarily be a public health hazard. But I think that at least this is like a starting point of something that already exists in statute. So I just wanted to give that. But otherwise, I think those are all of the notes that I have on the bill. I'm happy to answer any additional questions if you have them.
Where did you get that pen?
This pin I got from Vermont Creamery, and if I didn't, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure I did.
Gary Green?
Yeah.
Any real questions?
I think we have a lot to think about to get this.
We think so, yeah.
I think we can do it. We can say Russell.
Representative O'Brien.
Nicole, back to your open meeting, I just wondered at the agency, can you think of any situation where there's been sort of open meeting while the agency is figuring out either beneficiary payments or grants?
Not off the top of my head, no. Yeah, no.
So no, on the select board, I mean, the one thing that's sort of close is when we open bids are open because they're, during an actual meeting, but everything else, right? It seems like it would almost fall into an executive session thing once you start getting into personal financial stuff.
Right. And we could, I think we could do an executive session, but I just wondered like the dynamics of like, would we just be doing executive section every time?
Right.
Right.
Right, yeah. And the BCAP grants were not administered through the agency, through the ag agency, they were ACCD, so
Yeah, so
we have
we,
to ask them how they did that.
yeah, so we had a review board. So we reviewed all the applications and we went through their computer system and we approved it. The payments on the back end, though, I think Brett would probably be the best person to talk to at ACCD, but I believe that they were beneficiary payments that went out. There was no like formal grant agreement necessarily, but I don't want to misspeak on that. I can look back and also send that as an update into what they did there.
Representative Burt?
The funding, I don't know if this is a question for now, but the funding formula, it doesn't really talk about like the scope, from what I saw of like, say I was looking, it's got 20 million in it and there's 500 farms that are affected in a single year, right, by some sort of catastrophe. That would be $40,000 per farm on average. It could go out and it would deplete the fund entirely. I don't know how many farms were affected by the flood these last couple of years, but I bet there were 500 potentially in that ballpark that were affected. It shouldn't, it seems like part of the algorithm should be that is the scale of the, how many farms we have, how much, this is X amount of dollars we have to work with. This is how we're going to award, because otherwise it's going to be, if we start handing out $100,000 to the first come, first served, by the time we get 100 farms out, we're done.
I think that's a great point. And one of the things that I had been thinking about and why I brought up the first come, first serve model, right? Is that it says up to $150,000 here. So if somebody comes through and let's say we don't have 20 million, right? Let's say we have 500,000 in the account and the first farm comes through and they get 150,000. And then what? Right? So that's where I'm like, I think we need more parameters.
Right, how much discretion, either discretion or, yeah, other parameters.
Or we have a year with a multi-pronged attack like 23, you know, the apple orchards and the berry farmers could have, you know, if there was only 2 million and it could have depleted the whole thing before the flood ever happened. But we know it's not a endless pile of money. I mean, you know, so I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Do it equitably.
But is there?
So, go ahead, Representative.
Thanks, Dave. This has a cap of 50% losses.
And that's acceptable.
Was BCAP something, was it 20%? Was that just, it turned out to be that, or was that like the target? Like if you proved you had 100,000, most you could get was a $20,000 beneficial payment?
Yeah, so for BGAP specifically, one, it was only physical losses, and this talks about revenue losses. So I just want to make that distinction. But yeah, so it was up to 20% of physical losses that you could show. And then it increased to 30%, somewhere along the lines in the first year. But yes, you could only get up to 30% of your reported physical losses.
I mean, it'd be interesting if the agency or the board or whoever, talking about your 500 farms, if that could be a sliding scale, if they said this year, because we have so many farms, it's a 20% as opposed to 50, you know, that would make the money go around a lot.
Yeah, unless it's you know, if they gotta pay it out quick and the first one is a freeze that happens in May.
Right.
And then the second one's a flood that happens in August. Instead of July, let's move it back to August.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
Yeah, so we would need to think about, you know, that exactly that scenario and how in a perfect world would you, if, you know, since you can't predict ahead of time, then what do we do?
perfect.
Chair, I just realized that what we talked about before was not on the record about the federal funding. Do you want me to speak to that a little?
Oh, sure, yeah.
So the bill does talk about federal disaster funds. It has a few different potential funding mechanisms, but it talks about federal funding that could go to this fund and be distributed that way. So what I had talked to the chair about before was that I'm a little concerned about that for a couple of reasons. One, I don't see forestry in here. And I know that the USDA disaster relief money that I'm discussing with them right now does include forestry. So that would not necessarily line up with what USDA has for eligibility criteria versus what we've set at the state level. So I just wanted to highlight that I don't want to set us up where we either can accept federal funding or we accept federal funding and we're in this like conundrum of we can't put it through this process for whatever eligibility reasons there are. Yeah, so that was one of the things that I just wanted to let the committee know.
So, and that's, you're referring to, I mean, there's the general case years from now, federal funding that might come in, but also right now we're anticipating some federal funding.
Yes,
And you're saying that includes
forestry.
forestry, okay. And we're gonna know more about that shortly.
I hope so.
Okay,
Like I am forgetting what I said to the committee, what I said offline, and I'm sorry. I have a meeting on that tomorrow to hopefully learn more.
okay, good. You had mentioned that to me earlier, and this is the, I think when the secretary was in early in the session, mentioned that there was considerable amount of federal money coming, and the 8 states were part of a group, New England states, Alaska and Hawaii, and that it was still to be determined what Vermont's share would be. And we're getting closer to knowing that.
It's 220 million total that will be divided. We don't know what the formula is yet, but it'll be divided amongst the New England states plus Hawaii, because Alaska, as far as I know, opted out. So we're down to 7.
Oh. Well, yes. Or seven.
Nicole, are those funds FEMA or are they federal farm bill fund?
They are federal farm bill funds that came through in the last continuing resolution, I believe. And they are directly through USDA, specifically the Farm Service Agency. Yes.
And they are en route or they've arrived?
So we have not gotten our number yet, or our cut, so to speak, of the 220 million. But our understanding of what we know so far is that the funding goes through the Farm Service Agency and direct to each state's Department of Agriculture. We call ours the Agency of Agriculture here. After we've designed a program, which that's what the first meeting is about, is to talk about kind of the parameters of designing the program, is my understanding.
All right, well, let's stay in touch about that.
Mhm.
If you let us know what you find out.
Yeah, on S60 as it pertains to forestry. And our bill up there has forestry written all through it. Maybe we'll do a straw poll later on, but I thought about we could put forestry back in. Because it's working the land. In some capacity or other.
Yeah, and this also may be relevant to this federal.
Very
funding.
well.
Yeah,
It has forestry and
It does.
good observations.
And I can't speak for ANR, but they were involved when we sent our data to USDA. They gave me the forestry data as well.
all right. But that's all that you had. Yes, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We will be hearing tomorrow from Forest Parks. Testifying on this bill, so we'll continue having this very specific conversation about whether we want to, and how we might want to incorporate forestry. We'll let you go. I think, Nicole, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before we wrap up, though, anybody have anything else you want to say that you didn't say?
Well, one more thing for Nicole. We recently passed the VITA bill with that 2 million in it for potential
Right.
similar, right?
Yes, yeah.
Does
Thank you.
does the agency have any, do you look through those applications for VITA for farm relief, low interest loans?
I don't specifically, but VITA has a board, and I believe that we do have representation on that board. Yes.
And as you just mentioned, that funding was for loans, not grants.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, anybody have anything else?
On the floor of your glasses.
Yeah.
Just checking the agenda. So that's tomorrow morning at 9 that we have Oliver Pearson and Catherine speaking in from Forest Parks. And then at 9:30, we've got some testimony on H386. It's the planned transfer assistance program. Yeah. It's, I believe, going to be a short time on the floor again tomorrow, but we don't have anything scheduled for after the floor.
At 11:15 a.m. I have a constituent on ways and means on education issues. I'd like to be able to excuse myself for.
Be fine.
Yeah.
And I've got that Farm Bureau thing. I haven't done
Tomorrow, okay, right, good, say.
And I have to introduce a bill for.
It's not today.
Same time.
I have a note that says you're out at 3:40.
Right, and then I looked at their agenda and it's good.
It's current.
Yeah.